Season 2 of Taxi is off to a phenomenal start. There are some really great moments in the first 4 episodes. I will be talking about the first 4 episodes just now. I'll go through each of them in turn, mention some positives, and whether there are any criticisms, which for the most part is not the case. So we have Season 2, Episode 1, Louie and the Nice Girl, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. I had no idea Rhea Perlman was in it so soon. She plays Zena Sherman, and she's restocking the vending machine, and she thinks Louie is cute. But Elaine says, don't go there, not a good idea, and Zena assumes that this is because Louie, or Elaine rather, wants Louie for herself. Elaine screams, Alex walks over and asks what's wrong, and she tells him, and Alex screams. And it's probably my favourite scream ever. It was so comical, so well done. And Alex decides to introduce Zena to Louie, and Louie invites Zena to his cousin's wedding, which seems to be moving a little bit quickly. But nevertheless, and Alex says afterwards, what's the worst that could happen? To which Elaine responds, she could have his baby. And Alex screams again. So I had a lot of fun with that. And Louie comes back 5 weeks later without a shirt on, which is not what I was expecting. And he's had an amazing, fantastic, very physical time with her. And then Zena comes in and confesses to Alex, without Louie hearing, that she hasn't had any physical contact with Louie at all. Now, it doesn't surprise me that Louie is making a big scene out of this and pretending they have this amazing love life, but I was curious to know why that actually isn't the case. And Louie ends up talking with Alex, and he said, and I thought this was really sweet, Louie said to Alex, you're the only one I almost can stomach. Which is a really nice thing for Louie to say, and it really shows just how valuable Alex is as a friend. And Louie explains to Alex that Zena is the first girl he's ever been on a date with twice, which clearly for Louie means that he really, really likes her. And they establish that she's the first nice girl he's ever been with. I guess he's used to being with girls who are faster and looser, and Zena is actually really sweet and really nice. And Louie then decides to break up with her, because that's what you do when you really like somebody, and they try and talk it out, and then it's a complete roller coaster, constantly going back and forth, never really sure where it's going to end up. And Zena asks him for a goodbye kiss. We can break up, I just want a goodbye kiss first. And she gets to kiss him, and the episode ends with her cackling the way he did every time her name was mentioned. And I like the fact that she was in control of the situation by the end. And Rhea Perlman was just absolutely fantastic, and they work so well together. I did wonder if this was the first time that Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman had met. It actually isn't. They met quite a few years ago before this, and on screen they're just absolutely fantastic together. And I really like Zena as a character. I have no idea if we'll see her again. I don't want to know until that pops up in an episode. But certainly I rather liked her, and no negatives at all. Then we have Season 2, Episode 2, Honour Thy Father, directed again, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. And we have Alex's sister Charlotte, played by Joan Hackett. She's looking for Alex. It turns out their father had a heart attack. Alex hasn't seen his father in a very long time. And we do eventually find out why, and we have this really great scene between Alex and Charlotte when they're talking about their father and things that he did or didn't do. And I thought that was definitely quite a moving scene, and ultimately Alex does go to see him, and I did not expect this to go the way it did. He walks up to his father, and his father's in a hospital bed, and Alex basically opens his heart and gets really emotional, and it's a really beautiful thing, a beautiful scene, and he says all of these really nice things, and then somebody walks in the room behind him, a character played by Jack Guilford, and this person says Alex's name. It turns out that's his father. The man in the bed is not Alex's father. It's the person behind him. Obviously, he hasn't seen his father in decades, so he didn't recognise him. And obviously, when somebody's in a hospital bed, they do look quite different, particularly if they're attached to wires and everything. And I guess just in the emotional moment, he didn't look much beyond that. And it's a shame that he never got to be as emotional with his actual father as he did with the fake father, but it was still a nice scene, and the comedy there really brought it back up with the arrival of his actual father as well. No negatives there either. Not a bad episode. I think we have some good messages there about making time to see your loved ones and say what you really want to say before it's too late. I think in those moments, Alex really did value what he was able to say to his fake father, and I thought it was definitely a moving scene. Then we have season 2, episode 3, Reverend Jim, A Space Odyssey, directed again by the wonderful James Burrows, and the gang bump into Reverend Jim, and this scene, I think, was funnier, or Reverend Jim was funnier in this scene than he was with his previous appearances. I really enjoyed watching him interact there, and they decide to see if he can get a job as a cab driver to give him a bit of focus and a bit of drive in his life, pun not intended. And they decide to do this, but they realise maybe we can't get him a job doing that. Alex says, what kind of training could he possibly have? And everybody says none. And Alex says, what kind of skills could he possibly have? And everybody says none. And Alex says, what kind of job could we possibly get him? And they all say in unison, cab driver. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. Cab driving, I think, is a skilled profession, because having to drive around, first of all, is a skill. Having to interact with customers is a skill. It's a skill I don't have. I cannot deal with constantly meeting new people all day. So actually, I don't agree with that, but certainly it worked with the comedy in the moment. And Reverend Jim then comes into the taxi office, the garage, and he slips something into Louie's coffee. And the next thing we know, Louie is an absolute delight. He'd given him a tranquilizer. Louie didn't realise this, of course. And Louie is singing on Moonlight Bay, which I absolutely love. Brilliant song. And then Reverend Jim joins in. And then the others start singing it. And Louie ends up lying down, about to sleep on the top of the taxi. And it's just an absolute joy. Such a fabulous scene. And they're then with Reverend Jim as he's filling out the form for the application to do his test to get his taxi license. Very, very funny scene, very entertaining, and he's having difficulty with the form, and he's reading out the various things he needs to fill in, like his name, and then he reads eyes, and Elaine very quickly says, no, don't put 2. Which I loved. Yes, he has 2 eyes, but it meant his eye colour, and I loved that quite a lot. And it was a really, really entertaining scene. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and everything goes well. He gets his licence, he gets in the front of the cab, and he drives backwards into the wall. So, not a great way to start his new career, but ultimately a really fun episode. The only negative, and this may sound like a contradiction, but I think the opening scene was a little bit longer than it needed to be. I did find it very funny. I did think Reverend Jim was very funny in that scene, but I do think the scene lasted for longer than it should have done. But that's not unique to this episode. I do find that Taxi often has scenes that are double the length they need to be. But it wasn't too bad. I still ultimately enjoyed the episode. And then we come to season 2, episode 4, Nardo Loses Her Marbles, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. And it starts off with Louie making Latka empty his pockets. He has a tiny kitten in his pocket. That's not what I was expecting. Absolutely adorable. The rest of the episode focuses on Elaine. And Alex is, very sweetly, quite worried about Elaine, as she's been really busy lately, hasn't had time to breathe. And then things kind of go a bit crazy at the art gallery, where she kind of loses it a little bit. And Alex is driving her home. And he suggests maybe she sees a psychiatrist, just to help her get her life back on track in a way that's more manageable, because at the moment she has a lot on her plate. And I wasn't expecting this. Elaine ends up kissing Alex. And it's never occurred to me before that Elaine might end up in a relationship with one of the guys. I've never ever considered that as a possibility. And that's not what's happening here, but it was the first time I thought maybe there could be romance between some of them. And I don't know what to expect there, but it's clear that she was doing this in her vulnerable state, and much to Alex's credit, he basically pointed this out and wasn't going to take advantage of her, even though it was clear part of him maybe wanted to. And Elaine ends up going to see Dr. Collins, played by Tom Ewell, and she does realise that, yeah, maybe everything Alex was saying is true. Maybe she does have a lot on her plate, and she gets really emotional. It's a really moving, powerful scene, and I think it's a great message for anybody who might be in Elaine's position, that A, going to see a psychiatrist or even a therapist is potentially a good thing, and B, maybe just evaluate how much you're doing in your life, because things might get a little out of control. I don't think Elaine just woke up one morning and suddenly had a giant to-do list. I think it's more that just every now and then something else gets added in because it's just one more thing. It's not a big deal. But when you have 10 one more things, it gets a little bit crazy. So I think we have some great takeaways there. And what I also love is that 2 weeks later, rather, Elaine is back in the garage. She's had a lot of psychotherapy sessions, and she confirms with Alex that, yeah, she was just trying to sleep with him because of her headspace. I like the fact that they've kind of drawn a line under that. And they've very clearly said what happened between Alex and Elaine was just because of the situation. We're not suggesting that, Elaine or Alex have strong feelings for each other that they're going to try and pursue. If it happens down the line, I'm all for it. I have no idea. But certainly I like the fact that they're not dangling things and leaving us with too many questions. I kind of like that there. And no negatives here either. Not a bad episode at all. If I were to rank them, I guess I'd say, surprisingly, I thought Louie and the Nice Girl would be my favourite. And it is amazing. But I have to say, Reverend Jim A Space Odyssey just has too many amazing scenes. That's my number one. Then Louie and the Nice Girl. And then I think Honour Thy Father and Nardo Loses Her Marbles would be joint third. I can't decide between them. But a great batch. Really enjoyed them. Really looking forward to watching the rest of season 2. Season 2 of Taxi is definitely off to a really, really strong start.